So, it was still foggy in the morning when my daughter Madison made her way over to my tent, and she was not looking particularly happy. She explained that her brother Sam and the other boys had all taken off and left her, and they were off on their hike. And none of the other wanderers in our group were in any condition to hike that day. So that just left the two of us. And she thought, since she was trying to be sympathetic, that I shouldn't hike alone, so she was being generous to maybe offer that she might possibly go with me on this hike. So the Wanderers is a group that I started with a couple of dads about 6 years earlier, and every month for 6 years we took the kids out on an adventure, often backpacking overnight. And we were at the point where some of our older kids were going to graduate high school and move on, and this would be our last big hurrah. And so we thought a fitting kind of camping experience would be to hike Mount Washington. So our plan originally was that we were going to hike in on the Webster Cliff Trail, set up our camp, do a 13-mile out and back to the top of Mount Washington, and then spend the night next day, hike off the mountain. So what we didn't realize was that topographical maps are something you should pay more attention to. And it turns out that the Webster Cliff Trail is one of the hardest sections of the Appalachian Trail between Maine and Georgia. And a simple 6-mile trip, which should have taken us maybe 3 hours, took Madison and the boys 6 hours, myself and a couple others 9 hours, and the other two dads 12 hours. They didn't get in until 1:30 in the morning, and so 5 of the group were not going to be hiking that day. Now Madison is 2 years younger than the rest of the boys and her brother Sam. But she had been on every trip that we had gone on for the 6 years, and she's rough, she's tough, she's competitive. They would never leave her behind. She kept up. She was often in the lead and also provided the only voice of reason amongst the boys. So there was no way that she was going to allow the boys to go accomplish something like climbing Mount Washington and have that held over her head. So she was going, didn't matter what. So we decided we're going to hike together, and we set off. She's a little bit conflicted at this point, and the conflict is not the camping part, it's not the hiking part, she's good with that. The conflict is that she's now 14. And if you've ever been around a 14-year-old teenage girl, there's very subtle changes that you might observe in their personality. So for instance, a simple interaction might be, I might say something provocative like, Maddie, have a great day. And she would respond, don't tell me what to do. Right? A simple process of getting up in the morning, getting dressed and getting out of the house somehow became a 2-hour hair and makeup process. I don't know, but there were little things like that happening, and the idea at this point in her life of being wet and dirty on the side of a mountain was not on her to-do list in any way, shape, or form. But again, she's conflicted because her competitive nature was never going to allow the boys to accomplish something that she couldn't do. So there we are. So we set off in the fog. As soon as we get above the tree line, the fog starts to burn off, and we get on the ridge line on our way to Mount Washington. And we're chit-chatting and stuff, and I was pointing out that the sun is coming out, everything's going to be great, blue skies and all this. She's not convinced. She's telling me that she feels that thunder and lightning is on the way, and that the gods are trying to kill her every time she goes to the top of a mountain. I think she's being overly dramatic, but to be fair, she has been on the mountain twice when that actually happened. So, who knows? Anyways, so we're going along and everything's fine. We get just to the base of the mountain, the actual half mile that takes you up to the peak of the mountain, and there's an actual warning sign. And it warns all the hikers how dangerous it is to hike Mount Washington. And it says that sudden changes in weather are a thing, and that people die on the mountain. So she has me take a picture of her in front of the sign as to document a sort of a last time seen alive kind of image. Right? So I take the picture. Then we hike up over the big boulders, and we get to the peak of the mountain, which is kind of a surreal experience. I don't know if you've ever been there, but we hiked in, so that's 2 days in the woods, and then you get to the top, and you notice the road, and you notice the train, and you notice the buildings, people walking around in flip-flops. There's a restaurant. There's, you know, it's a very strange place, and the cars are being rewarded for the effort that they put in. They get a sticker. So Madison and I, no sticker. So we're in there, and we're like, okay, well, let's get a little something to eat at the restaurant, as one does in the middle of the woods. So we go in, we get our pizza, we're wandering around. Maddie finds the big board that they have that lists all 161 people that actually died on a mountain. And she's pointing out where her name is going to go, right here. I laugh, Maddie laughs, and then the lights go out. And we turn around, and the sunshine's gone. It's pitch black outside. We look at each other for a split second. Before I can say anything, Maddie yells, "Run!" And she just like doesn't even, she flies. And she goes out the door, and she's sailing over the rocks. I'm running after her as fast as I can, jumping cat-like from boulder to boulder, and trying to catch up with her. Now it's starting to rain a little bit. So we get down to the trail on the ridge line, and we put our raincoats on as fast as we can, and then the skies just explode. It's wind, it's rain, there's hail, there's thunder, there's lightning, there's everything horrifying that you could ask for on the top of this freaking mountain. So Madison is having a nervous breakdown because lightning is her biggest fear, right? So I grab her, and we find a little low spot, and I'm like, Maddie, we'll huddle down here, and we'll wait out the storm. And we're huddling, and she's shaking, and she's like crying and stuff, and the lightning is coming down, and it's hailing, and we can barely even hear each other because it's so loud, and the wind. And the mountain itself is shaking when the thunder and the lightning is striking all around us. And it's pitch black. We can't see more than like 20 yards in this whole thing. And I'm thinking about all this stuff. I'm like, what should we do for safety? I'm like, Maddie, we should be 15 feet apart. So if one of us gets hit by lightning and dies, the other one doesn't die. And she screams at me, he's like, no, Dad, I don't want to die without you. And she's hugging me as hard as she can. And now I'm crying, and I was like, I don't want to die without you, Maddie. And so we're hugging and sobbing and shaking, and the whole world is coming apart, and we're waiting any minute to be vaporized, right? At some point, I don't know what happened, but we didn't die, just to let you know. And the sky started to gently lighten, and we started to breathe a little bit easier, and off in the distance, you could see just a little peak of blue sky. Behind us, it still looked like the end of the world, but out in front, it looked like there was a little hope, and I'm like, man, I think we're good. Let's just start walking back to the camp, right? We have like 6 miles to go. So she gets up, and she's holding my hand, and every time there's a rumble behind us, she's squeezing it as hard as it can. We walked for 4 miles like that. A solid 2 hours, 2.5 miles, she would not let go of my hand. Even though it was blue sky above us and blue sky in front of us, there were still dark clouds over behind us. So we walk along, and we finally get off the ridge line. As soon as we enter the woods, she relaxes a little bit. She lets go of my hand. Now we're tired, we're thirsty, we're dirty, we're miserable, and we're trying to get ourselves together again. And we're heading down towards our tent site. And on our way, we pass the mitzvah hut. So the hut system in the Appalachian Mountains, if you're not familiar with it, is a series of huts that they have for campers to stay at. And they have bunks, and in the season, they have a crew there that will make you breakfast and make you dinner. So it's kind of fancy. We stay in tents because we don't afford fancy. But we're looking at it, and I'm like, Maddie, why don't we just go in, we'll sit down for a minute, we'll get something to drink, we'll rest, and then we'll just walk the little rest of the way back to the camp. She's like, okay. So as we approach the door, it opens, and out walks a boy she knows from high school, who looks at her shocked and goes, Maddie? She answers, Kringle, coolly. His name is Chris, but she calls him Kringle. And she's like, so what are you doing here? He's like, I'm up here with my family and our cousins. We came up to spend the weekend up in the huts. And he's like, what are you doing here? It's like, well, I'm with the Wanderers, and we came up to hike Mount Washington. He's like, oh my God, I wanted to do that. That's what we were supposed to do, but the weather was so crazy today. My parents wouldn't let us go and stuff. I can't believe it. Did you hike it? He's like, yeah, we did. Ponytail flip. It's what we do. So then she's like, well, I have to go. I'm cooking dinner for the group tonight. And we start walking away. I haven't said anything because I'm not that stupid. So we start walking away. The minute Kringle disappears back into the hut, Madison loses control. She's like, oh my God, I am so embarrassed. This is the worst moment of my life. I can't believe I'm dirty, I'm wet, my hair is a mess. I can't believe you saw me here. Oh my God, my life is over. It's like, Maddie, slow down, take a breath. Think about it. It's like, you just did something really remarkable. You hiked to the top of Mount Washington in a severe lightning and thunderstorm. Okay, how many people do you know just your age that did that? Well, Sam and the other boys. I'm like, okay, the other boys who were with us did it. But how many other people do you know did something like that? She's like, all right, well, probably not, Indy. Right, I said, and how many girls did it, right? You're the only one that we know of that did that today. She thinks about it for a minute. She's like, I guess. And then we walk along in silence for a little bit. And then she holds my hand. And this time it's not because she was afraid. Next up we have Barry.